right, I call the Human Resources Appointments and Equity Committee to order. Clerk, please take the roll.
As a reminder to all in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county YouTube page. Calling the roll, Ms. Baker.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Sweeney.
Present.
Ms. Conwell.
Present.
We have a quorum. I'd also like the record to reflect that Councilmember Schron is also in attendance.
Thank you. Thank you for attending, Councilman Schron. Do we have any public comments?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have one person signed in. Colin Sycon.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a business agent for the Laborers Local 860. We represent about 500 or 600 county employees, and I would just like to talk for a quick moment about the proposed testing mandate that's going to be brought forward today. 6 other unions and ourselves had gotten together and expressed some issues we had with the policy written as is. The county went back, retooled a few of the things, and there are still some issues we have with the policy as it is written. We feel there are gaps in the policy. I'm not necessarily sure it is going to achieve its intended objective, and in some ways could still be punitive towards our members, we feel. There seems to be no defined mechanism to end the policy or any kind of end date in sight. And some of the logistics of how this is going to be applied are still not figured out. The union does not feel it's wise to approve make it up as you go kind of policy. And we would hope that before something gets implemented, all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted. That's all I would like to share.
Thank you for your comments. We
Thank
appreciate it. Any other public comments?
No, that's all that was signed in.
Thank you. If you would please read the first matter referred to committee.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, we need to approve the minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none?
I'll second.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have motion to accept. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nays? None. The minutes are approved.
Resolution 2022-0017, adopting various changes to the Cuyahoga County non-bargaining classification plan.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Albert Bouchahine with the Personnel Review Commission.
Welcome.
Thank you. The PRC approved recommending these changes to you at their January 12th, 2022 meeting. All of the revised and deleted classifications you're considering are part of PRC's routine maintenance of the class plan. We've worked extensively with the Department of Human Resources and Department Management to ensure that they're all informed of these proposed changes. In accordance with the PRC rules, the proposed changes have been posted on the PRC's website before their consideration. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Do we have any questions? Yes, go right ahead.
Any deletions?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Conwell, there are 3 deletions. These are all 3 have been vacant for quite a few years. We're just cleaning up the class plan. When we see that there are classifications that don't have any incumbents, we always reach out to HR and the departments to see if they have any intention of filling these positions in the near future. All 3 of these positions, we've been informed that they've been vacant for years and we have no intention of filling them, so we're just removing them from the class plan.
Can you go over what the 3 are?
Absolutely.
Do they fall under a specific department?
They are all Department of Health and Human Service agencies. First one is the Data Control Technician. Next one is the Early Childhood Program Specialist. And the third and last one is the Employment Contract Negotiator Evaluator. They're all in the HHS agencies.
Okay, and I guess in the future, well, Madam Chair, I don't want to move on those right now. I wasn't made aware that there were going to be any deletions, and I know the Department of Health and Human Services are hurting already. So I see that the administration chose not to fill those. I'd like a better understanding of why they chose not to fill those. I mean, because I know that Employment and Family Services, they need that as well as the data, so.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Conwell, again, this is routine class plan maintenance. There's no hurry to do any of this. I will reach out to the departments and provide this committee more information.
I'd feel a little bit comfortable not, for me.
We will
not
hold
moving.
this till our next committee?
If it's okay with you, Madam Chair, if we can just hold the 3 deletions, but move forward with the 3 updates.
Any other questions? Then we will amend this legislation to only include the updates as stated and not the 3 vacant positions that we've just discussed. I'll make that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of the amended legislation, say aye.
Aye.
Hearing any nays? None. We have just amended this legislation. Are there any other questions we have? All right, so I will make the motion. This does not need,
Second readings, no, ma'am.
so I will make a motion to move this item to the full body of the council for second reading adoption as it is for 3 readings. Do I have
Second.
second? Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none. This has
Thank you.
passed. All right, Madam Clerk, if you would please read the next item referred to committee.
Resolution 2022-0022, extending the appointment of Interim Director of the Department of Human Resources, Hipaa N. Marshall, to June 29, 2022.
Mr. Carroll, welcome.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Here on behalf of the County Executive's Office, wanted to request council to extend the temporary appointment.
Would you mind just stating your full name for the record?
Sure. Matt Carroll from the County Executive's Office. And the request is for the 120-day extension of the interim appointment. I believe the administration is happy with the director's work and wanted her to continue doing what she's doing.
Okay, are there any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Chief, just want to say she's doing a wonderful job. She's got 120 days, and I'm fully supportive of you considering keeping her around if she wants to. But through the chair, what's your timeline for making the final decision?
Through the chair to the councilman, I think honestly their intention is not to fill the position this year permanently, but to continue the temporary appointments with, with council's approval going forward. I think due to the new executive coming in and the difficulty in recruitment, most likely, I believe that's the conclusion.
Thank you. I believe that's a prudent strategy. And Madam Chair, may I ask another?
Sure, go right ahead.
Is there any consideration just to make it to the end of the year?
The extension?
Yeah.
Through the chair, Councilman, I didn't know that council had that authority to do that, but
No idea, but I'm just bringing it
That's
up.
certainly the, that is, I believe that is the intent of the request.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
I think that your intent is to renew 2 more times.
That would be the result, Chair.
I would think that that would be okay to keep it that
I
way.
just threw it out there, Madam Chairwoman.
We'll meet again, and there shouldn't be any interruption, and we have actually plenty of time even for this to go through 3 readings. Is that right? So, unless someone has an objection. All right, any other questions? I agree. I think that our HR director or interim has done a very good job in jumping in and stepping in like she's been there for, which she has been in that before that position. So we certainly are appreciative of her work. So I guess, may I have I'll make the motion to approve.
I have one more that
Oh, go
might be
right ahead.
awkward.
Of course.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. With the title, was there an increase in pay?
Through the chair to the councilman, I don't know that there was a TWL. I can't say for sure. Someone else may know, but.
It was just more of a question, and just in my logic is a increased title, increased responsibility.
Yeah,
And possibly that thought process of pay would be consumer.
I understand. And again, I don't know if there was a TWL or not. It's certainly somebody knows. I don't know myself.
I'll find out later. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
All right, any other questions? All right, not seeing any, I will make a motion to move this item to full body of the council for second reading. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none, this has been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Madam Clerk, if you would please read the next item.
Ordinance number 2022-0002, an uncodified ordinance establishing a COVID-19 testing policy to be applicable to all county executive employees.
All right. Here's Sheba. Good, Mr. Corey. If you would both please state your name for the record.
Hipaa Marshall, Human Resources Department.
Bob Corey, Public Safety Chief.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Hipaa Marshall, and I am the Interim Chief Human Resources Officer for the Human Resources Department. I'm here to ask your approval of the COVID-19 employees testing policy for county executive employees. It is important to Cuyahoga County to support the health and safety of our employees and the public who must visit our buildings. Over time, we have seen various measures taken by the county to mitigate the spread of the virus. However, we must remain vigilant if we are to continue to provide a safe working environment. This is another measure to continue working towards that end. On last Friday, we did meet with our union leadership to address their questions and concerns. While I believe we've addressed many of them, we understand that there are some details that still need to be worked out. We've assured them that we are following up with an FAQ to address their remaining concerns. Once again, this policy, we believe, is working toward that goal of having a safe and healthy working environment.
Thanks, Sheba. To the chair. So we started this process in earnest when we were considering a vaccine mandate, much like the Common Pleas Court, Municipal Court, the County Prosecutor's Office, Public Defender's Office did. And so the strong consideration is, what are the requirements to stop the spread of the coronavirus? They are separation, masking, of course the vaccine, and now the booster, and then testing in order to make sure that those that are positive for COVID, who may be asymptomatic, cannot continue to spread it. So rather than, the administration, the executive, chief of staff, et cetera, there was a consensus among the administration that rather than go with the vaccine mandate, we would start with testing, surveillance testing. In addition to masking, separation, work at home whenever possible, people are still coming into the building. The public still needed it protected. And then we determined that the best way to do that was a form of testing. So then the process for how do we do that started in earnest in August. So we met with Metro Health to get their guidance, always being informed by CDC, State Board of Health, County Board of Health. But we met in earnest in August with Dr. Bruner and their epidemiological team back in August. And so they had an approach. They strongly urged us to do a vaccine mandate. They said, but if you want to do testing, they could supply testing. It would have been a drive-through with PCR testing, and there would be a 2-day turnaround to get results. And it would have been a good plan, but it would require two things. One, it was pretty expensive. I think the tests were $30 to maybe 30 or more for each test. Two, it would require our workers to do this on their own time. They would have to go to the drive-through, and the law department determined that we would have to pay for that privilege under the Fair Labor Standards Act and some other law. I don't want to play lawyer on it. But in any event, those two things made the approaches of on their own time and PCR testing to be cost prohibitive and problematic. So the next thing we look to is, what are the other things that the CDC, Board of Health, Metro Health recommend? Well, on-site surveillance testing. And for example, as part of the CDC regimen, they say testing unvaccinated employees in a workplace setting is good, testing unvaccinated students, faculty, and staff, testing unvaccinated person before or after travel, et cetera. The next question is, well, what kind of tests? So in October, once a determination was made to move forward this program, myself, together with our team, created a team site, and then we began to interview vendors researching different test types from the widely used Binax Now to the one that we're recommending, which is the OnGo test kit. We resolved upon the OnGo test kit because it had the benefit of two things. One, it was a good test and had very high accuracy, more even than the Binax Now. And two, it came with enterprise software, such that when the individual is tested, it can upload it to an enterprise site that HR has access to, which really will help with compliance. And so then we began the procurement process, looking at costs, negotiating prices, et cetera. So with that, we think that what we're doing is typical of an approach, a safety approach for governments, buildings, and businesses. In the absence of a vax mandate, fine, a testing mandate, and make that part of your regimen. Masking, social distancing, work from home when you can, and surveillance testing. Why the unvaccinated? Because they represent for themselves the highest risk for serious illness and hospitalization. And in discussion, I don't think that's debatable. Two, because they're unvaccinated, they have no vaccination protection against getting any of the strains. So with the vaccination, without the vaccination, they're more likely to catch the virus and, as a result, be greater likely to be transmitters. So that's why we're targeting the unvaccinated. That's all I have for my introductory remarks.
All right. Well, thank you both very much. We appreciate the overview of this proposed legislation. We do have a proposed substitute, just so we're all talking about the correct legislation. The only change was it was changed from Thursday, February, I believe it was 3rd, was it?
Originally the 14th.
Oh, the 4th, well,
Oh, yeah, because you have.
Excuse me, Ms. Marshall, can you speak?
so from the copy I had was February 3rd, and it is now being changed to February 17th, which puts us after the next council meeting on the 8th, should this move forward. So I will make the motion to at least be able to talk about the correct legislation. I make the motion to approve the proposed substitute. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Mr. Gallagher, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hearing any nays? Hearing none, the proposed substitute is approved. All right, I know this has been talked about, and I had the opportunity to discuss this with you a little bit yesterday, but I know that there are many questions out there, and I think I'll start with my council colleagues. Councilman Gallagher.
Bob, Shiva, welcome. Bob, I have a feeling that you have been laid upon the altar, and I hope it isn't that way. But I think to start this, let's start at the beginning. What was the genesis of this? Who was in the room, and whose idea in the end was this? And please do not say collective. There are name names.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's easy. At the point in time where a preliminary decision was made that we should do something, whether that's vaccine mandate or testing, in the room was myself, Matt Carroll, the executive, I'm just going around the room, chief of staff. Sheba at the time was the what's
HR director.
Yeah, HR director. She was there. Greg Huth was there, and I don't know at that point whether or not he had Wesley Kretsch there. I don't think I'm missing anybody else, Sheba, at that point. So at that point in time, I had already been assigned to do some preliminary research. So I did a minor presentation on that.
When was this? Because
I get you exact dates.
We talked months ago, I think, and to be fair to you,
Yeah.
You were kind of like, what are we going to do? And that was
that's
brought
right.
up, and we spoke over there. So that was months and months ago. Was that the period of time we're talking about?
It was summer. It was summer.
Okay, fair enough. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
it was summer. I have, we probably met 3 times. So I got the calendar dates because we did presentations on it, yeah. The other thing I failed to neglect, my last point, is that, and I expressed this to Councilwoman Baker and Councilwoman Simon, who was there at the time. You know, reasonable people can differ on this. We don't feel like we've got the market cornered on the best approach. We are presenting what we believe is the best approach, But there are reasonable people who, on the edges, can say, cost benefit, I don't agree. Or perhaps you need more than what you're suggesting to do. So we bring the presentation confident that this is the best, is a good approach, confident that it's supported in the medical science, supported by the folks that we work with every day, Metro Health, County Board of Health. Nevertheless, when you read the literature, they talk about could, can, et cetera. So you can disagree about approaches on the fringes, and we come with you with a certain amount of humility in light of that.
All right, well, thank you for that. Good? Any other questions? Yes.
I didn't hear the answer to Mike's question as far as who made the recommendation.
Oh,
Well, I would assume the executive makes the final decision.
Armin did. Sorry, excuse me. Executive Budish absolutely did, unequivocally. But I don't think there were any dissenters. I mean,
Councilman Miller.
Madam Chair, to the chief, how often under this program would people be tested? And could you, first of all, how long does it take to get a test result?
So from very start to when you hand somebody a box to when they complete it, it's probably about 20 minutes. 10 minutes is actually the reading of the result, but for prepping for it and afterwards sort of cleaning up. So about 20 minutes.
And could you walk me through what would happen when people test positive?
So what we're putting in this ordinance here is that they would simply, once they're all done, and if they were to test positive, they were to come back, grab their things, and go ahead and go home. At that point, they can call their supervisor or email their HR department. That's what we're requesting, so that they would simply go and leave the building.
And what would have to happen for them to be able to return to work?
According to the CDC guidelines, it would be between 5 and 10 days. It just depends on what you're feeling. So if you're asymptomatic after 5 days, according to the CDC guidelines, you should be able to return. From what I've learned over this, most people are not, who test positive, asymptomatic after 5 days. They would return after 10. They'd also have the opportunity at that point to ask for that the emergency leave that we've already put into place. So this is not an employee who would be harmed by that. They would be able to ask for emergency leave, use their own time if they haven't exhausted their time already.
And the final question I have is just to note that since the 1st of January, we've gone from 3,000 new cases a day in Cuyahoga County to about 350, a decline of over 85%, and it's been steadily dropping on a daily basis. And so what I'm saying is that I'm not opposed to the policy in principle, but I'm wondering whether with the new cases dropping rapidly, whether it would make some sense to wait a few weeks and see whether this is really necessary.
Do you have an answer to that question?
I don't have an answer to that question. I could say, while I think it's prudent to start the policy right away, I want to say that what we've provided today does have an end date to it. So it's not to continue to go on forever and ever policy.
yeah, I didn't
The
see
end date is second page, the last sentence on that page.
By 4 p.m. on, July 1st.
Yes.
That's quite that would be all of February, all of March, all of April, all of May. all of
Right.
June. That's quite an extension. Okay, I think we're going to
I think so. I think that we use that date because we're thinking that nothing happens, there's no discipline or anything like that. Employees have the whole month of February and pretty much half the month of March, because there are other dates that we've changed as well in the policy. We've changed it to say that this won't become effective unless the ordinance, of course, until and when the ordinance becomes effective. And then they have 30 days from that date before any discipline would ever begin to happen, so that employees have a chance to get used to it, to understand, to know what the rules are, what the facts are. We're working on finalizing an FAQ, and we didn't finalize it on purpose because we wanted to hear what the remaining questions would be, so that they too would also be addressed. But back to your point, if you want to talk about the cases,
So that's an excellent question, and one that Councilwoman Baker pressed. And it's reasonable to say, hey, look, as they said, Omicron was going to continue to reduce. They said, I remember Dr. Fauci saying that 2 months ago, that they were looking at South Africa, and it's going, through January, and exactly that's what happened. And also, Terry Allen, our directors, said the same thing. We mirrored South Africa, and that's why the state of Ohio's flipped. We were the highest at 3,000 cases on August 30th, and now we're still high. This is the 2-week moving average that the state puts out. We're still high on January 26th at 467 cases, but we're the bottom. We're the 88th best, or the worst. And so, with regard to when we started this, though, Omicron, we didn't even know that wasn't even a thing. We started this process at a time when cases were in Cuyahoga County 104 per 100,000. So at the time, we were thinking that we still thought this presented enough of a risk because the CDC says anything above 50, you got to start working on it. So we were at 104 at the time that we started the research in earnest. And then Omicron came, and it was like, whoa, so this is a fortuitous opportunity to address this. But now Omicron seems to be moving away, so what's going to be left in its place? Is it still Delta? Is it the new strain of Omicron? And so that was the basis for why we're continuing to be here, despite the fact that I expect that the next time we talk about the 467 cases, it's going to be 200 cases, but still well above the 50 per 100,000.
Okay. That's good to know. Councilman Gallagher.
Okay, now I think we're going to get in the meat of things.
Right.
As we all know, the federal government indemnified all the manufacturers. Is the county willing to waive that, take responsibility for any damages done to employees that in essence are forced to take the shots? I don't call them vaccines, I call them shots, that are still being used under emergency use, meaning that these manufacturers could put anything they want in there, don't know what's going to happen. Usually takes 5 years. We did this in a year, and God bless. Is the county willing to waive that responsibility and take that fully on? If not, I think our discussion here is over. Law Director, what's your answer?
My answer would be no. I don't think we're authorized to
Well,
do
then why in God's name would you force an employee to maintain their position in Cuyahoga County or anywhere else if you're not going to back up what you're forcing into their arms? Was this ever discussed?
If I may, this policy doesn't require anybody to be vaccinated.
To maintain their position, it does.
No, it doesn't. It requires you to be tested regularly if you're not vaccinated. But it doesn't require that any employee be vaccinated.
Disciplinary actions will not begin until 30 days after the commencement of the program. Any employee, blah, 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 it will be, let me get this right. What if I falsify a test result?
I'm sorry?
What if I falsify a test result?
And there's disciplinary action.
What's the disciplinary action?
It goes to progressive discipline under either whether that's the handbook or
I'm a
under
really
CBA.
bad person. We've done this 10 times. Now what happens?
Termination.
Okay, so you are forcing them under termination to put this in their arms. I had COVID.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, that's not correct.
Yeah, you
That's
just
simply not
said it
correct.
was. Don't argue with me because you just said it was. I'm a bad employee. I falsified 10 results in a row. You terminated me. You terminated me, and you'd be right to do that. I'm not debating that.
That's not what the policy says.
That's what's going to happen, and you know it. And if you don't know it, you need to go back to law school. You just said that.
Not what the policy
Termination
says.
is on the table, and you know it.
If they falsify a test, which is not getting a vaccine, they falsify a test, like that, any other falsification, they would be subject to discipline,
In the end, what happens? I continue to do it.
termination, or falsifying a test,
Thank you very much.
refusing to get a vaccine.
Bob, was this discussed?
No, for a couple reasons. For a couple reasons. Your point is well taken, but it was not a concern for a couple of reasons. At the time, I forget when, Pfizer was no longer under emergency use authorization. And two, we came off the vaccine mandate and made it a testing mandate for those that are unvaccinated. Now, people have argued that, well, that's two sides of the same coin, but I believe that there's a distinction with a difference because testing is does not have the invasive quality of a inoculation with with Pfizer or Moderna with 2 shots. And so we fell upon the fact that testing is not invasive, and as a result was a minor inconvenience for employees and something that they would be willing to do for their protection, the public's protection, and coworkers' protection. We didn't expect that there would be, opposition. Maybe that's naive, but nevertheless, we didn't because we were short of a vax mandate.
Well, the problem that I think we have, and we could get in the weeds, and I would prefer not to, but when you're basically telling employees for your employment, you have to do this, it's a danger the county is unwilling to take, yet they're willing to take the right of that individual not to take it. Do you have any outs for employees with medical rationales or religious rationales?
So it's a test, and I don't know if everyone's had a COVID test where you simply swab your nose and they put it in a solution. So we're not asking employees to ingest anything. Yes, there's always either a religious accommodation or there's a spiritual, moral, and there's one other accommodation that employees can submit in writing why they would object to having to take the test. So we would get those, we would review those on their merit and according to the rules, and then make a determination on whether an employee would be exempt. That goes for a vaccine, but we don't have a vaccine mandate. It also would go for the testing.
Okay. It's, this is a sticky situation. And I think the biggest problem that we do have is that it became political, that the CDC became political. Nobody knew what was happening. If my colleagues weren't here before this all happened in March 2 years ago, I called a meeting in Safety Committee. And we had the head immunology doctor from Metro Hospital, the UH, the Cleveland Clinic, the medical examiner, the health director, and no one really knew what to deal with because we didn't. But certain questions were asked that I found incredibly interesting today. One asked by my colleague down the line here, and she said, what about masks? At which point the doctor from Metro was like, absolutely not. You don't wear masks unless you're sick. And then masks became the going thing. After the CDC and Dr. Fauci said no masks. Well, then we found out that was the, what do they call it? The angel's lie to force people not to buy masks so they could mask up the health departments and whatnot. So we have this ping pong game of what's real and what's not real, which, by the way, the CDC just said what you're wearing right now is a joke. Doesn't work. It's no better than jewelry. If you have an N95, it's a little bit different, but still will not stop this disease. But for the record, I had it. I'm vaccinated, and I got Omicron. So I don't know why we're doing this right now. This is basically an ongoing flu type thing. We're going to be dealing with it. I think what we're doing is, I think we're just bending the knee to try and find some solution or make ourselves feel better. But when you're doing policies like this, I think you really have to research it, get into the weeds, and have every ability to answer every question, and be willing to take the responsibility that the federal government refused to take and gave those suppliers of these drugs free rein without responsibility. If the county is that sure about this, they should waive that, take responsibility, and that's when I think the needle will move. Doing this is just an inconvenience for people that are already upset with us. This, what you have done, all the efforts that you have placed into this, would have been better served putting the effort into buying these employees out, which we're now 5 years behind. I lay that on the doorstep of the executive personally. So I will not be supporting this. I don't think it's rational. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's going to work. And I think it's an intrusion on our employees once again. And I don't blame either one of you. I think you've been sent up here as the sacrificial lambs.
Man.
Thank you, Councilman.
Madam Chairwoman.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Sweeney, I know you had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Distinguished colleagues, thanks for coming up here today. I know our county executive generally cares, and he's doing this for the right reason, to protect the employees. And that's the genesis of it. That's the premise I'm going off of. I just have a couple questions that came to my mind from my colleagues talking. When the group got together, that was a snapshot in time. Before the legislation that was just amendment was introduced, did that same group to get together within the last 3 weeks or so and say, let's think about where we're at in a snapshot of time, where's this disease at, or this pandemic, and maybe we can reconsider not pulling the trigger at this one moment? Did that group get together?
We got together within, I think, the last 30 days, for sure, all together. I could look for the calendar appointment, and I will when we're.
No, I'm just trying, did you reconsider it again?
But nevertheless, every day, almost every day, one of us, whether it's the HR director, me, Matt Carroll, we're talking to the executive and the chief of staff. And I can say that as of today, they are still endorsing the approach. No question about that.
Absolutely, but I want to be very specific through the chair.
Yeah, yes.
That group got together at one time,
I
and they
think-
looked at each other with the facts that they had, and our executive said, let's move forward. And my thought is, if that group got together again, put the same amount of effort in, and compared all the notes, did the same decision come, but it didn't occur. So I'm good with that. And just a couple more. When you say, Madam Chair, to our interim director, you said once they get tested and they test positive, they got to go home.
Correct.
Can some work at home, or do they have to not work and have to burn sick time? Tell me what the impact on that employee for that one day that they got to go home.
So what we do now is if an employee contracts COVID and they go home, if they can work from home, if they feel well enough, they can work from home. Usually in the very beginning, if they can work from home.
Whose choice is that?
That's the
It's the
employee.
supervisor's choice to say you can work at home, or the employee has the right to work at home if they can?
The employee can work at home if they can,
Okay.
if they choose to. But we don't know when they're at home how they're feeling. So we're not dictating that they must work at home. If they're able to work at home, they can work at home. And it's not to say even if they feel good, I mean, we don't know that they're not using that up to 80 hours emergency leave that they have available to them. It would be that if they're able to work at home, they can.
Thank you. And just the 80 hours is a wonderful benefit to give the safety net. But I really like crisp, absolute direction on these kind of there's some questions about exactly how it happens. Because some folks don't have the opportunity to work at home. Some folks, maybe I'll work at home, maybe I'll not work at home. If you can work at home, you will work at home unless you want to activate the emergency leave. So some more clarity on that. And then you said when 5 days, if they're kind of sick, they might stay the 10 days.
So
Do
you're
they have
not-
to get retested when they come back, or I'm past my 5-day incubation period, I can come back without a test? How does that work if it's in the week?
So according to the CDC guidelines, if you're within those if after 5 days you're asymptomatic, you should be able to return to work as long as you're maintaining your 6 feet away from individuals and you're wearing your mask. If not, you should still continue to wait those 10 days.
Oh, absolutely, but the specific question is, the employee says, I'm 5 days, I feel good, I'm within the week that I got tested. Can they come in after their 5 days saying, I feel good, I'm coming
I'll
back
have
to
to
work?
get an answer back on that one. We've not had any employee do that, so I don't think that,
But I think it's very reasonable.
Yeah.
Hi, I got 5 days, I'm going back to work, don't want to burn any more sick time. Do I have to get tested, not get tested? So there's loose ends, that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
I
It's not
understand.
half-baked, there's loose ends, and I like things very tight.
okay.
Did we buy any of these tests yet?
So by the way, the meeting was December 28th, back to that question, the last time that we had a formal meeting where we all got together. At that meeting, it was myself, Sheba, Greg Huth, Pat Smock. I'm pretty sure Wesley Kretsch was there, the executive and the chief of staff. I don't recall whether Matt Carroll was there, but I think Matt Carroll was there too, but I'm not sure.
not a big
But
deal.
that's who was on the invitation. And we did meet, I just couldn't remember the date, December 28th.
Perfect.
And I'm using to refresh my recollection, as they say, the calendar appointment I have on here.
And
Yeah.
through the chair, the only question I had was, did that group get together, looked at the facts that we currently have surrounding it at this snapshot in time, and move forward? And the answer is yes?
Yes.
I'm very happy with
Yes.
that.
And moreover, and continue to do so, but, we didn't have all of us meeting.
No,
Yeah,
because
okay.
that was the decision day.
And then we do have 8,000 test kits on hand, so why'd you buy the test kits without approval of the ordinance? Okay, fair question. 2 reasons. Supply chain, in anticipation of a possible passage, we wanted to start the process, right? So it was a timing thing. At the time we ordered those test kits, supply chain was even more vulnerable than it is today. It seems like the country's more ramping up. The federal government's ramping up, 1 billion test kits for everyone. So companies are ramping up their testing. So if the council doesn't approve this ordinance, we could pivot to surveillance testing involved with close contact tracing, right? We could turn to the jail and say, what are the jail needs? So there was also an extension on the expiration that the FDA just approved for the on-go test kits. So I think we got an additional 2 or 3 months on our current test kits. So that was the strategy for why we bought 8,000. We have held the big order in abeyance for $400,000 or so, pending what council does.
Thank you.
So that order is waiting, depending upon what council does.
And thank you, because when I got the office today, I saw a nice test, so thank you for giving it to me. And the last question, if I could?
If you can, I know there's other questions.
Yeah, I'm trying to get deep, my bad. Just doing the test itself, because I did one myself, it was somewhat complicated. I mean, to go online, to upload it, and I'm not the most computer savvy individual, and I imagine there's some of my coworkers that are a little bit above me that would have a challenge doing it by themselves at home, uploading it. Is there support staff that would be available with a simple phone call? Because I was walked
Absolutely.
through it.
Yes.
But that's an immediate, okay, I
Yes,
just want to make sure.
absolutely.
It's all about making sure the employees
Yeah.
are able to not be overburdened by something. And that's what my thought process while I'm making my decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. And I know, yes,
Through the chair to whoever wants to answer, my thought process is, because I'm the HHS chair, and so this policy matters because we have a lot of people coming in to our buildings. I think you answered in terms of who pays for the test, that we're paying for it. Okay, so I believe
Excuse
Director
me, Ms.
Marshall
Conwell, can you speak a
stated,
little closer to the microphone? Thank you.
I believe Director Marshall stated that the employees will be walked out if
No,
they,
not walked out.
okay.
That sends a different message. No, they would just simply come back to their desk, grab their things, and then just simply go home.
Okay, and so my question around that is, does that violate their HIPAA laws?
To test
If
positive.
they test positive, they come back to their desk, they know they tested positive, so they need to walk out and remove their things. Does that violate their HIPAA laws in any way? Because their coworkers at that point is then going to know that they have COVID-19. I'm just wondering if we thought that process out.
We did, and I don't think that it does. And Greg, if you want to.
Because currently the policy is now, if an employee tests positive for COVID without our testing policy in place, the other employees are not notified who that person is. They're just notified that a person had COVID. So with this, if they're testing positive on site and they're asked to immediate leave, hence, I'm just wondering, are there HIPAA violations violated at that point?
And Madam Chairman, I mean, the same thing happens when we get that email notice saying, somebody on this floor has been identified and is not here. You end up making the same assumption. So, we don't know, we don't tell people while anybody is leaving, but we get that same assumption when we see somebody who isn't around because we've gotten an email notice now that says somebody's tested
But
positive.
they're not testing positive in-house. I don't understand that. And I don't want it to belabor. I just want to make sure that you guys are actually walking this through and having that thought, because that's a concern of mine. Because they leave, but they're not testing positive and immediately leaving. They're just notifying you that they tested positive from home. And so they're not walking out and leaving. So just give some thought to that. Number 2, are government or business subject to litigation if no policy is in place?
Not that I'm aware of.
Can you research that?
Sure,
We just
sure.
want to make
Yeah, I mean, it's-
sure. And sick days, were they adjusted for employees since COVID-19 started? I'm not saying they should be or they shouldn't. I'm just wondering because I know COVID just had a rampant on everybody, and so some people get it and they have to use excessive days. So I'm just wondering, did the administration give any thought to that?
We have not. We've allowed for the emergency leave days, and I know over the past year there was emergency time. Patrick, mind speaking to the emergency time that we had? The emergency leave for now, that we have the 80 hours, then an employee, if they exhaust that time and need an additional 80 hours, they can, up to 80 hours, they can grant it then. But Councilwoman's questions was about additional leave time for sick time.
Good morning, Pat Smock, Department of Human Resources, Madam Chair, Councilwoman. There is no additional sick time for employees, but as Ms. Marshall addressed, the council did pass an ordinance allowing for up to 80 hours of emergency leave for employees. The process now is an employee reports that they tested positive, are out for testing, or have close contact with a household member, and they apply for up to 80 hours of emergency leave. And we follow the CDC guidelines regarding putting them out if they show a documentation that they were tested positive, et cetera. So in this case, if someone were to test positive in the workplace, setting aside the question about how they leave the building, et cetera, they could apply for that up to 80 hours of emergency leave. They would not have to dip into their sick leave for those first 80 hours out.
And they're continued, through the chair, they're continued to be paid?
Chair, Councilwoman, yes, they are continuing to be paid. Emergency leave is paid leave, yes, ma'am. So it doesn't dip into their sick leave. It's treated as sick leave, similar to that.
And I have one final question and then a comment. Test positive. Someone mentioned that when I guess they're asked to go home if they test positive, are we planning, will their stations be immediately cleaned at that point?
Yeah, so as soon as we can notify the team that does the cleaning, yes, they will come in right away.
Okay.
Usually though, at the end of the day that we get that done, but if we need them to come right away, then they're usually pretty responsive to that. We've not had any delays in any requests.
And I have pros and cons with this policy, so I don't want to come off that I'm against it, but, you know, it makes sense, so I don't think I've decided myself personally, but I want to just throw out there as a suggestion. It was talked about if the policy doesn't pass. So if the policy doesn't pass, have you thought of a voluntary testing for the employees? Because you'll be amazed. A lot of people want tests. They want to know if they're taking something home to their kids. So I'm just saying, if it possibly doesn't pass with council, maybe you can come up with a voluntary testing. The test kits haven't gone to waste. They're still there, and will probably be all amazed that people will still want those testing. But I'm just saying, if the policy doesn't pass, my suggestion.
So currently, there's a vaccine mandate over in the courts and the Justice Center. All those organizations went with the vaccine mandate. Nevertheless, there's, I want to say 70 or so with all the organizations for the county that have exemptions for either medical or religion. So at this point in time, we're also offering to them the use of these test kits for weekly testing. But there have been requests from them to provide them the test kits for additional purposes, such as close contact. If you're in close contact with someone for 15 minutes or more during the 24-hour period, yada, yada, then you're exposed and you could be subject to getting the COVID-19. So the test kits could be used for surveillance testing for that population. So we would want to be, we want to have a basis beyond a simple request, because the test kits, as they say, ain't cheap at $15 a test. So we want a rationale, but that's just one example of how we could pivot for additional surveillance testing.
So what do you think about the volunteer?
What would be, okay, so what would be the employee's basis for voluntary? They're just concerned, or is it because they were in close contact? And so if they're volunteering because they believe they were in close contact, I think that should be something that could be explored. Why do you want the test? What's your basis for concern, et cetera? And then you'd have to have, as we know, a buttoned up standard for how we're providing these test kits beyond whim, for example. And I know that's not what you're suggesting.
Yeah, but basically you have the policy set already. It's either going to go up or it's going to go down. So if it goes down and we don't agree, it won't be put into play. But there could be some wording or something put into play that, you know, we still have these test kits. How many employees want to, you can have them fill it out, a sheet or whatever, that they're willing to volunteer to get tested every week. And I'm pretty sure that you'll be amazed that there'll be a lot of people that'll probably want that. They're not being made to do it.
I see what you're saying. You're saying volunteer to
do
weekly testing.
Yes.
I just caught up. I apologize. Yeah.
Because, and it was another thought, because I'm just thinking it's the same thing as the furloughs. We did voluntary furloughs. So just thinking on that basis.
It's absolutely
I'm just
certainly
saying,
worth
I don't know how
considering.
it's going to go, but I'm
Right.
just giving suggestions.
Thank you.
And if I may, Councilman, not only because you were in close contact, but maybe you have the sniffles. You know, we are living in such fear that all you have to do is have the sniffles, and you think you've got a virus that's we're all dreading we may die from. So perhaps someone has the sniffles and says, you know, it'd be nice if I had a test kit just to make sure that it is just a cold, like I've had a million times before. And that may be a reason to give it to employees, just so on their own safety and curiosity that they aren't coming to work, or they do come to work with a little cold. You know, it's that they aren't staying home because they're fearing that they have something more than just that. If I may, Councilman, I have a few questions. I've been pretty patient in wanting to ask a few things. First of all, for the committee, vaccination rate right now in the county is 58%. Is that still the number?
Yes.
So we are talking about 42% of the unvaccinated that work in the county.
That's assuming that the correction office, for example, which had a low percentage of getting the $100, have, the communication just recently went out to all the staff saying, hey, upload your vaccine card for this program. So I don't know what we could expect to see in the coming couple weeks, but that's the current number of people that you just cited that have put their vaccine card on our site. Are there others that have not yet done that? Correction officers don't have computers at work. Many of them don't have internet at home. It's difficult to do with your phone, et cetera. So will we get more? That's a question. Who knows?
Just for today's exercise and only using the numbers we have in front of us, we can perhaps say it could be up to 60, but we don't really know. So that leaves us with about 42%, maybe 40%. Which I believe at our last conversation, that's about 2,000 employees. So we're talking about 2,000 employees that we are concerned about that could be coming to work and spreading the virus because they're unvaccinated. Just so we're clear about what we're doing here. So I guess I would ask you, first question, try to be as direct as I can. Who in the medical industry, who particularly is actually endorsing that we should do this? Who is putting their name on this to say, yes, Cuyahoga County, we might be in cooperation with you and we may support, but who is actually saying you need to do this in order for this to be done and protecting people?
Nobody's endorsing the specifics of our program because of the HR implications, but explicitly, if not implicitly, the CDC, which I just quoted from, which is still up on their site. The County Board of Health is providing rapid test kits. Our medical examiner's office has medical test kits even before our program for on-site testing when necessary, whether it's surveillance or otherwise. Metro Health, that, as I mentioned earlier, when we worked with them in August, the implicit statement from them, no, the explicit statement from them was, you should go with a vaccine mandate. Short of that, yes, we believe that surveillance testing is a good approach, and here's our plan to you. So all of these organizations, plus we see the federal government spending, giving us 1 billion test kits, trying to get 1 billion test kits out there, have endorsed it. In addition to Ohio Healthcare Association, the state of Ohio for nursing homes, hospitals, require testing of their staff. I think it's all staff, but it might be just unvaccinated. So we see repeatedly in the literature, conversations with the aforementioned people I've just said, that this is a standard approach. One that could be quibbled with on the edges, of course, or in this case altogether, but not outside the mainstream.
Okay, well, it's just generally from what you're hearing from the medical industry, our own Board of Health, there isn't anyone who is from those organizations that willing to step up and say, absolutely, County Council, this is something you need to do, and I am endorsing this procedure, and I'm not offering any changes.
No, there's nobody currently doing that, but me personally, I did not ask for that. I had not considered that.
The second thing I want to ask, try to get as direct as I can, is that and tell me if I'm wrong, the Omicron is different than the Delta. Is that true? Okay, and so if I'm understanding it right, the Delta was the fear of the droplets. I'm talking to you, you're talking to me, and those droplets within 3 to 6 feet can reach you. And that was the fear of the distancing, that was the reason for the masking, and of course, that's the reason for the vaccination. But the Omicron, if I'm mistaken, is different. It is in the air. It is like catching a cold, that the mask that you are both wearing, and even according to the CDC, is not a protection against the Omicron, that it is those particles, it's like an aerosol, it's like spraying perfume, and it's just there. And so contact tracing or mask wearing or even social distancing, tell me why those procedures or mandates that we have in place now are helping against the Omicron variant that is not the same as the Delta. You can't catch it the same way as the Delta. And it is pretty widely supported that the paper masks that you're both wearing are really not going to stop those fine particles from coming in or out, and even the cloth mask. And if you really want to be serious about it, the N95 at least gives some protection, but it has to be fitted correctly, and it only lasts, from what I'm reading, 3 to 5 days because they're disposable. So why aren't we perhaps going in that direction? If we're serious about trying to stop this, then what it is that we're proposing today. I hope that's direct enough. I know it's long, but.
It's very direct. No, I understood the question well. Reasonable question, and I think we have a reasonable answer. We believe that the CDC, first of all, it's our understanding, and I don't want to be speak as a medical practitioner. I'm parroting what I'm told by the literature, the CDC sites, conversations with Metro Health, that Delta, and maybe even the prior version, is equally susceptible to be transmitted through the air. That's why even under Delta, appropriate ventilation, social distancing, getting between that 6 feet, because the particles can translate through conversation is worse, singing is worse, et cetera. All of that guidance existed under Delta, and I don't think it's changed. My understanding with Omicron, though, is that it is more contagious. I think it's because it's the quality of the virus itself, not because it's ability for aerosolization. But your point is taken. Omicron is more contagious. We had 3,000 cases in Cuyahoga County in December 30th. Okay. So my understanding also is that masking is still a good solution against Omicron, Delta, and the prior variants. Your point is well taken with regard to the quality of masking. The CDC has made clear that surgical masks, which I'm wearing and she was wearing, are better than cloth masks, and N95 or KN95s are better than surgical masks. So your point is well taken, and it is not something that we haven't considered investing in additional masking. We haven't taken that step because we have done other things like made sure we ensure social distancing. We have done work from home where you can, and then the idea of testing surveillance would be an additional component of that. But that's not without merit to consider additional masking requirements and funding of either surgical or KN95 or maybe even N95 masks.
So as you stand here today, you're assuring us through your research that the masks that you're wearing today, the paper masks and the cloth masks that we see predominantly worn, that both of those are helping with the Omicron virus from us being able to get it or give it. All right, is that your position today?
I believe they are.
Yes.
There's a lot of research out there that denies that, but I accept your.
And we're doing that on the basis of the aforementioned experts that we're consulting with.
Okay. If I may continue, and I know you have a question down there. And this is for the law director, and it was a question I asked yesterday, but I think that it's important for the committee perhaps to hear the answer. I was really concerned that we have gone through 2 years of this or more, and I believe it was last maybe April or May, where we all came back from the remote work that we were doing. But I don't have a good answer yet as to why the executive felt that, and I would say this is more of a permanent decision, not a public health, we need to do something, so I'm taking an executive order, I'm going to do it. But we've been doing this now for a while and really have not had much conversation. The mask mandating was all the executive. The temperature screening was all the executive. The vaccination proof, when vaccines finally came out, was all the executive, and if you showed a vaccination card, you don't have to wear a mask. If you don't, you have to wear one. That was all done by him. The mask mandates to going back to everyone wearing a mask again, because the numbers went up, again, was an executive order. And then back to temperature screening and distancing was all an executive order. Why, at this point, and there's a lot of months in there, I mean, it's not just 2 weeks, a lot of time in there, as to why it is county council has never been asked to consider any of those processes. And now we're getting into testing, and suddenly it's something where we need to ask county council why it is that we need to do this. Why not just make that an executive order? I mean, I think all of these other things should have been on our table and should have been asked by us to at least consider it. But given that we weren't, I'm just curious to know, and maybe Law Director, you can chime in. I really wasn't sure of the answer I heard yesterday, but if that is the answer, then the rest of the council here can.
Certainly, it's going to be substantially the same. It's just that those other, all of those other policies, if you will, were a couple of things. They applied to everybody who came in the building. You know, you had to wear a mask, you had to have your temperature checked, you had to maintain social distancing. This, on the other hand, is a policy that's pretty much housed and managed and owned by the HR department, applying only to our employees. So I'll admit that there was some differing of opinion in our office as to whether or not this could be implemented unilaterally without going through this process. But ultimately, I made the decision that it should come here because, frankly, puts us in the county as a whole in the best position possible if any challenge comes forward on it.
And the vaccination, proof of vaccination, I believe that was only for employees, or did you ask?
I think you're right. I think you're right about that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just want everyone to hear what the reasons why we are now given this opportunity, when other opportunities, certainly over the last several months, we could have had a discussion to maybe given you some information you may not have even thought about, because we had a chance to really look at it. But thank you for your answer. The testing of once a week, as you said earlier, this is such a contagious, or has been a contagious variant. Why did you settle on once a week? I mean, if it's that important that we think that people could be spreading this, why is it that we don't do it every other day? What is it that, I mean, you're kind of, like I said in the meeting, kind of spitting in the ocean of hoping to catch the person at a time when they may be going through it, could be at the beginning, middle, end, and there are differences in spread in all those three places in their cycle, so why is it?
No, and as you asked it yesterday, it's still a fair question, and I'm glad we're discussing it. The contagion period, you could have accrued the virus today and not be positive with our rapid test kit until 3 days later. So as a result, you could be tested on Monday and be negative, and then had you been tested 3 days later, you could have been found out. So the purpose for starting at a minimum with once a week is that there's no question that it will yield the opportunities to find those that perhaps are low symptoms, no symptoms, and still be positive. So our approach is, this is a big operation. So the enemy of the good is the perfect. And to start with something that is 2 days a week is difficult to just start with, number one. Number two, might not be cost effective. So our rationale was start with a good approach, which is likely to yield results of positive tests for those. Let's see how the program works and continue to consult with the Board of Health, as is in our policy, or was in a policy, or still is in the policy. Continue, but we would do it anyway. Continue to consult with Metro Health and see if we should go to a second day. See if then it should be extended then next to vaccinated employees, because as you pointed out yesterday, Omicron could be spread by people who are no symptoms at all, vaccinated, and yet continue to spread it. So the approach might be incremental, but it is a big operation involving as many as 2,000 employees, involving the test kits, which, as Councilman Sweeney had pointed out, are going to require us to support the employees on, and we need to see how well they adapt to it, and then we could look at the program and then see what enhancements we need to make. But we do believe that this is a good approach, that testing at least once a week will catch those who are in danger of serious physical illness or even hospitalization. And it does provide some protection for our staff and the public.
I appreciate that. Where's your position on natural immunity? We have had a spike over the holiday. I think all of us have had family members that unfortunately stopped a lot of the gatherings. A lot of food dropped off at the door and gifts dropped off at the door because family members were. But now that they have had it and have had it recently, and we see the cases dropping, where do you see natural immunity playing a role in this process?
Well, again, I think this is a good opportunity for Terry Allen, the Board of Health, to present on. But as you pointed out, the CDC has recognized that natural immunity can be effective, especially in the early months, against, at a minimum, serious illness. But when the CDC went through that and made that determination, they're still recommending the vaccination is the best approach, even for those that have had the disease. So again, we're following the science, as you will, and it depends on whether or not you accept the CDC as a guide or not arbiter of the situation. But I see that the CDC and the other medical experts struggling with, they can't even determine now how, if they were to test you now, they can't test for, are you immunized? Are you immunized enough? There's no test for determining the quality of your immunization, even after you've been vaccinated. So, so we look to them and they say, yes, the best protection is with a vaccine and a booster.
Okay, so if someone has experienced the Omicron and they are now expected to be tested and encouraged to be vaccinated, even though they just got off the Omicron illness, could that vaccine actually be a detriment to them?
I've not seen that anywhere in the literature or heard that from any of our medical experts. In fact, in the jail, we still provide vaccines if the inmate will accept it. We incentivize them with $50 goodie bags or $50 call cards to get the vaccine, regardless of whether they've been infected.
From memory, I believe that it was recommended that you wait like 3 months before you get your vaccine if you came down with the virus. And I think that was during the Delta days.
You still have to wait the 90 days if you catch COVID. You're not vaccinated, you have to wait 90 days before you're able to get the vaccine.
But meanwhile, in this program, an employee who's not vaccinated, who had COVID, has to still be tested.
Correct.
And if someone has had COVID and comes to work and knows they know they have natural immunity, they still have to be tested for the COVID. So, you know, and I know Councilman has a question. It is clear in the CDC, and I can read it if I need to, that vaccinated and unvaccinated are spreaders. Now, we all can agree, at least in today's meeting, that the unvaccinated, if they were to get it, could get it worse than the person who is vaccinated. But we do have cases of people who are vaccinated who also had a tough time getting through it. But for the most part, vaccinated and unvaccinated spread are contagious. So how is it that we are targeting the vaccinated? And I heard you say earlier that they have a viral load. That used to be the term they used to use. You had a higher viral load. I don't think that's the case anymore. And what else did I hear? That you're trying to protect the person who's unvaccinated so they don't get very sick. But of course, that's their choice. They're not hurting anyone else, but their own choice is, if I get it, I'm maybe healthy and strong, I don't care, I'm not going to take it, and I'll get through it. That's their choice. But they're not harming anyone else as a vaccinated person would, because they're both potentially contagious. And I can read that if you'd like me to, but it is in the CDC that both are potentially contagious. What is your position on targeting only the unvaccinated?
So I think I expressed the same point that vaccinated folks are still, especially with Omicron, are still have the opportunity to spread the disease if they acquire the disease after being vaccinated. But I think that our position is that we do want to protect our employees, that we invest in, that we pay for their health care from being subject to serious illness and even hospitalization, and that it is in our interest also, in addition to the employee's interest, to protect them from same. We also think it's in our interest to protect the public who is required to come to our buildings. They can't work from home. They have to pay their taxes. They have to go to court. Our clerk of courts come in contact with individuals. So we think it's also important to protect the public. And not only are the unvaccinated more likely to be subject to serious physical illness and hospitalization, but because they're unvaccinated, they have no protection. They have no protection against it. And it is clear from the medical experts that the vaccines, whether it's the Pfizer, Moderna, or Johnson, especially with a booster, provide a level of protection that no vaccination applies. So there is a greater opportunity for unvaccinated folks to contract the disease versus those that have protection from the vaccine.
Okay, so the premise is that we are trying to protect the employees who we're trying to protect them against themselves, is what you're saying.
And their coworkers and the public.
But vaccinated also can be the same, right?
That's correct.
So just so we're on the record saying that we both understand that vaccinated and unvaccinated can spread the virus the same, and we are protecting, because the people who refuse to do it, just for whatever reason, refuse to take the vaccine. And I would ask too, and I mentioned this to you before, that 2,000 people isn't 100,000 people. So to talk to those 2,000 people and perhaps ask them, why aren't you considering taking the vaccine? What is it that I can say to you, perhaps, that will change your mind? What expert do I need to bring in? Can we call your doctor and perhaps get their understanding? I know there are people that are dug in and will never, no matter what you say, will concede, but there are probably others that perhaps just need to be, maybe a conversation would be better than the heavy hand of saying, testing, you're going to stay home, or you're fired. I mean, that's a pretty heavy-handed way of trying to do this. We did the soft way with paying people $100 if you take it during a certain period of time, but I just wonder if you should give some consideration to actually reaching out to those, you know who they are, of refusing to take it and finding out why and recording that reason why, and maybe have a better understanding, and maybe they'll express something to you that you weren't aware of. Maybe there's, just a two-way street. Maybe there's something that you'll find out and say, oh, I didn't really consider that. You just never know. But I would encourage you to talk to those employees and find out for yourselves what our own county employees are thinking and why it is that they have to date refused the 42 to 40%. All right, well, that was my questions for now, and I know, Councilman Miller, you've been very patient in waiting. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would just like to get a little better understanding about the test administration process. Are we going to administer tests as people come to work, or are we going to give employees test kits and they take them at home, or do they have their choice as to which to do, or can they use their own tests and report the results? How is this going to work?
So the policy addresses both. The goal is that their tests will be distributed to each department, so we'll know who and where and how many. So the departments will receive the number of tests that they need. They'll be distributed at work, and employees will be allowed to take the test on work time, on their own work time. We're already in the process of getting the biohazard boxes, designating rooms and places where employees will be able to take that test during the day. But they do have the opportunity, if they would like, to take that test home and do that test at home as well. So they can do it in either situation.
And how are tests reported? Will the county have any way of verifying the result, or do we just have to take the employee's word for it?
So with the on-go test kits, it provides the benefit of a guided application that the other vendors don't provide. So the employees, and if they can't do it, we're going to provide them support, will be required to take the test kit in concert with the phone application. It's supported on Android as well as Apple iOS. That includes the phones and the tablets. And so when they do that, it provides them a nice little guide of how to do the test, and it provides some inherent audit, if you will, because you have to barcode scan both the box as well as the test strip itself, so that provides us knowing that this is a valid test. It is a current test. It's within the expiration period of time. And then once they're completed the test and they see the red line or the blue line, the application requires them to take a photograph of the test kit, answer questions about what they see, and then it provides the employee the result. Hey, you're positive. Hey, you're negative. At the same time, and we're having onboarding with which is free as part of so will not be additional cost to us. So if county council votes no, we'll still have the onboarding with the vendor, which is, I think, tomorrow, to install the enterprise software. So it's a web-based enterprise software. So when the employee does the application, completes the test, it will upload the results. The fact that they, completed the test, their name, employee ID, and then the result of the test. So we will have compliance there with minimal effort in terms of the HR department collecting a bunch of Excel spreadsheets from around all the departments and having to figure out through all these Excel spreadsheets who's tested, who has not tested, et cetera. So when we do the onboarding, we're going to get a much better picture of how HR will be able to get and consume that information.
So, Madam Chair, to the chief, we know that the fast result tests are not as accurate as the ones that take a day or two to get the results. And my question is, if an employee feels that their test was a false positive, do they have the option of going out on their own and getting one of the better tests? And if it comes back negative, would that supersede the quick test result in the county's eyes, and they would be able to come back to work sooner?
Excuse me, Ms. Marshall, can you speak into
Well,
that?
but just one twist on what you said, Councilman Miller. The rapid tests are highly accurate. They're just not as sensitive as the PCR test. So you're more unlikely to get false positives, but you can get false negatives because you didn't have enough viral load for the sensitivity of the test. So the concern would be for these rapid tests, false negatives. That's the primary concern. You could always get false positives if there's contamination, et cetera. So it's the sensitivity problem with the rapid tests, not the accuracy. They're highly accurate and search out whatever that COVID antigen is, but they're not as sensitive as the PCR tests. Just but now I'll turn it over.
So
But
what you're
yes.
saying is that false negatives are more likely than false positives with the quick test.
But if an employee were to go get a different test and they were to test negative, the PCR test is a lot more sensitive. And while Bob is correct, these tests are highly accurate. The employee would be allowed to return to work.
All right. Councilman Schron had a question. He's been patiently waiting. Is not a member of this
Thank you.
committee.
Well, I'm not a member of the committee, so it's only appropriate I wait to the end.
Thank you.
I've spent a lot of time in regards to this subject matter because I run a corporation with 400 or 500 employees, and so I was very, very much in depth on learning this. And to hear the response from the law director to Councilman Gallagher, it was clear that we've created a we-they out of this, which is what you try never to do in an organization. There's no way you cannot read, we are one part and you and they are the other, right? I can't, the record doesn't show yes or no. I mean, your shoulders don't recognize.
Okay, well, I didn't know that required a response, but if it does, then that's not the intention.
I understand the intention, but clearly the law director said, we're not putting this group here, we're putting this group over here. And so if you're not vaccinated, you are in the test group. And so those are the we-they that we've created. And it seems to me there's a structure in there. As long as we're going to go down that path of we-they, what percentage of our unvaccinated people have had COVID right now?
We've not taken that percentage. I don't have that answer.
Wait, you're telling me of 2,000 people, and we've had the discussion about natural immunity, we don't know what percentage of that 2,000 have already had COVID?
We do not know. We've not collected that data.
If it follows, go ahead, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, Bob. We should know how many people.
I thought there was a question about whether we can. Hipaa requirements, people may have called in sick and been positive. I thought when we looked at this, we do some reporting, for example, the correction staff for the jail and safety, but I don't believe it's ever been the policy to require employees to tell us how they've been sick. And so I thought before you were the HR director that there was thinking about that. So that's why we don't have the data.
Okay, so
That's my understanding.
People were taking time off. That doesn't show up in their HR records, and they were taking this unpaid time, and they were taking the extended emergency time off. That doesn't show up as far as the rationale, as far as.
It does, but the data was never aggregated.
Oh, so we know that they took the time off. We just never collected the data. Is what.
But maybe they didn't tell us why they were sick because they don't have to for certain short periods of time, et cetera. So.
In order to get paid, they wouldn't they have had to tell us in order to get paid under that emergency leave that they were taking it?
So under the emergency leave, yes, they have to tell us if they're going out for quarantining or if they're going out for actually having COVID. But at that time, we don't ask if they're vaccinated or unvaccinated.
I got that, but now we have the data that we have the vaccinated, and now we have the people. So I'm just trying to get to the aspects of I'm sure you both have probably looked at the time in August, the Israeli studies and all the other world studies on the impact of natural immunity had not even come out yet in August when you had your first meeting. Have you all looked at the studies on natural immunity from Israel and read them? And have you read the studies from all over the world that says that the study demonstrated that natural immunity confers longer lasting than stronger protection than a vaccination? The study that says that most governments around the world, with the exception of Australia, have proved this week that dramatically surrounding the tennis star, except for recovered status from natural immunity, that means that they have been recently affected, have since recovered, and are considered adequately immunized. I presented all of these to the county executive. I hope he shared these with you.
These were already known to us, the various studies, but what we're relying on is the CDC that still says, for example, that, well, just want to finish one point.
That's all right. No, I got it.
Yeah, that still says that vaccine, even in spite of the fact that you may have had COVID, is still recommended. And two, it would be very problematic to implement a situation in which we had to take medical records of people because we have not aggregated the data. So medical records of people would have to prove that they have gotten that they had gotten COVID, that we need medical evidence of that. And then how you would manage that when the CDC already says that having an immunization from a vaccination is still the best approach. So it doesn't seem like the cost or how you would manage figuring out who has had COVID versus who has not had COVID could be manageable. It's not worth the cost when the CDC says vaccination is still the gold standard.
And I think that probably gets back to Mr. Gallagher's, the underlying message here is you're trying to drive people to get the vaccination. Let's just face it. Let's be candid. This whole policy is designed with the underlying requirement. And by the way, I've had the vaccination. I've also had COVID. I've also had COVID and I transferred it to my spouse and she had the vaccination. So this is not a vaccination. This is a flu shot. Let's be all completely candid with what, as it's now turned out to be after a year plus. So the underlying message is we are trying to, whether or not we're mandating the vaccination, we are clearly trying to push somebody into the direction of getting that. It hasn't worked with all the other techniques, so here's one more technique it looks like. Because I'm against mandates, by the way. That's my underlying message here.
If this sounds disingenuous, so be it. That's not the case. Franklin, this program in much part, because we did research on who's doing what, and Franklin County is doing the approach, but what they're doing, for example, doing the same approach that we're presenting, but what they're doing is they're handing that same test kit to an individual and saying, you have to do it at home on your own time, for which you will not be paid. So we're not doing that here. We're saying, hey, we're going to make accommodations for you to do it at work, in safe places for you to do it, and you'll be paid. So I don't know what the incentive, for those that don't want to be vaccinated, I'm not seeing the incentive to want to get vaccinated based upon the current approach. So what the purpose of this is to make sure that those who are COVID positive aren't in our buildings infecting coworkers and the public. That is our private purpose, our stated purpose.
Yeah, but we've also all established, I've had the vaccinations and I got other people infected. Other people have had the vaccinations, they get them. So your facts are not correct anymore. Everybody can infect everybody, right?
Yes.
So to say that unless you follow what the council or the chairman said, unless you vaccinate and test everybody, and every 3 to 4 days, because CDC also says you got a 5-day window, which if I tested, I pass the 5-day window, I get my mask on, I can come to work, and you can't complain about that because I've met the criteria of the CDC. And for the next 10 days, I can come into work with my mask on, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So the fact that whether I had the vaccine, I didn't have the vaccine, I had COVID, I didn't have COVID, we're all capable nowadays of spreading it out, and we're all capable of getting a breakthrough nowadays. So your vaccine that you've got and the vaccine I got didn't protect me. Didn't protect me at all. Whether or not it slowed it down, we'll never know. We will never know whether the fact that I take my vitamin D and take my zinc and I exercise, I did 4 miles this morning, whether that protected me more than, and we all know that we can be mandating somebody being overweight. Well, that's a higher risk than anything we're talking about here, but we don't mandate that. We don't tell people you've got to lose weight because you're going to protect yourself and you're going to be a higher risk. So what I'm really concerned about, okay, so now let's go down this path. And we've graded the we, they. Do you think there's anybody going to quit as a result of this policy? I mean, historically, across the country, people have quit from airlines, from every walk of life. Do you think we're going to have people quit here too?
I don't. Franklin County did not experience any terminations, for example. A vaccine mandate, the Cleveland Clinic we saw, they had people that they had to suspend, and maybe there'll be some terminations there. But since we're not going with a vaccine mandate, I think it's unlikely that people would resign over this.
I can tell you, at my
that's fine.
company in Chicago, we had people telling us specifically they were going to quit
Okay.
because of this, because of, they don't want you telling me how I've got to treat myself. I will be shocked if we don't have people going to go quit. And I'll bet if we check with the union membership, I'll bet you they will find there'll be union members that will quit over zone. So have we thought about what happens in the event we have loss of people? Because we've had people talking about how difficult it is to find employees today. Have we wrestled? I mean, one of the problems we all had with the jail incident is we never did our mathematics and our background check before we did this consolidated jail. Have we done a spreadsheet? Have we done our homework? Have we done the homework as to what's the high and low as people who might quit as a result of this?
Well, it's all we talked about in the summer with regard to the vaccine mandate. And we waited with bated breath when Common Police Court and the prosecutor's office and the public defender instituted a vaccine mandate. A vaccine mandate, 100%, absent religious or medical exemptions. And they could speak for themselves, but my understanding from them is that they didn't have any resignations, which surprised me with the vaccine mandate.
Yep.
Which it surprised me. Maybe because they were, I don't know, liberal with the exemptions. I don't know. But there's, as I said, in their programs, I think there's a total of about 70 with exemptions. So maybe those that, if they were denied exemptions, might have resigned, but they didn't see that.
Yeah.
Columbus saw a increase. You're right. Columbus saw a substantial increase in those that got vaccinated because people didn't want to do it, test at home on their own time, right? But they didn't see any, with a testing mandate, they did not see terminations. So we did do that analysis. We did think about that and don't believe that we'll see there's a material risk of substantial terminations as a result of a test mandate.
And I'll just pick up because you brought it up a couple times. I was going to get to them later on. We got, and I know this council has had to approve some overtime for lunchtime, 5-minute breaks that were not properly allocated when we first got into here, and we all authorized that because we weren't correctly doing the time clocks. As far as the law director, Mr. Huth, in regards to people taking these tests at home, are we going to have to pay them for that time to take the test at home?
Madam Chairman of the Councilman, if they choose to take the test at home, no, we don't.
Okay, so we're going to pay them 100% one way if they choose to take it here.
Correct.
Okay, but you don't think that anybody's going to challenge us saying, hey, I want the privacy of taking it at home. It's taking time that I would have, I was entitled to be paid for, but I don't want to be around at the office to do it.
I'm never going to predict what somebody's going to challenge us on.
Okay, so you don't think we're going to have to come up in 3 years or 4 years from now, this council's not going to be asked to pay a lump sum payment like we did on the lunchtime?
I have no idea.
Okay, yeah, it strikes me as, and we've started to see how people are against mandates. You see, what, 1.5 million people up in our neighbors to the north in Canada. 1.5 million truck drivers are saying we don't want mandates on either one of these areas, and you can see that that's starting to happen all over the world. That mandates are a bad thing, and unlike smallpox or polio, those are vaccines. They stop polio. It stops smallpox. This is not stopping anything at this point in time, and that's the underlying thing we're trying to encourage people to do. It's just a deferral. It's a mitigator. I think we've all, sadly, it did not stop it. I wish we all were cheering for it to actually stop the things. Going back to the payments on this, so let's, if we buy the big lump, which you talked about, is around $350,000, $400,000 for just test kits. Is that what the county's going to pick up for just the kits?
I'm going to pull up some information on that right now.
Well, I just did some Kentucky windage. I took the number of tests
I have a
times
spreadsheet.
$15 times. I got between $350,000 and $400,000. So that's the kit.
So 360,000 will get us.
Funny, that's exactly the number I have on my piece of paper.
24,000.
Yeah.
Did you come up?
Yeah, same. Okay, so let's take the time away from work. What's the average salary that the person makes here in the county? Have you crunched that number?
I've not looked at that number.
We're about ready to take, and I've taken these these tests many times, so 20 minutes would be fast, because by the time you do the timing, you sit down, you get everything online, and I don't know, but the Abbott test, by the way, is also a monitor test too. I don't know whether you looked at the Abbott.
Yeah, we looked at the Abbott.
The Abbott's a fully monitored test too. You can buy it non-monitored, you can buy it monitored. I've taken it all over the world as a monitored test, so it's if you weren't aware of Abbott, Abbott is a very, very, and the individual gets their own authentication records on that. But, so let's take that same head count, 2,000 people, and times 20 minutes, times salary range of, I don't know, fully burdened with healthcare and everything like that. And you're going to do this for at least, what looks like 16 weeks? What's the number? What have we come up with as far as the cost to the taxpayers, that the taxpayers are going to be paying for all these individuals to be doing this test?
So with regard to the rates of pay, as Hipaa pointed out, we didn't do that calculation, but we realized that there is a cost to doing it on site versus at home and unpaid, as Franklin County did. But we believe that fully recognizing the fact that there's a cost of taking their time from work to do this, and as you pointed out, could take as much as 20 minutes, was worth the investment for the protection.
I'm not disagreeing with that part, but I'm just trying to get to the cost. We're probably looking at $1 million that we're going to pay of total time for these individuals plus this. So total time, we're going to be probably $1.25 million for this program.
I don't know.
Well, we know the 360 is a number that you and I basically agreed to. Is it going to be supervised at all? Is there going to be a supervisor sitting and looking at it? Are we going to bring people in a room, or trying to get back to Mr. Miller's?
No, because the application provides that auditing, that proctoring, if you will, by confirming the right box, that confirming the barcoding, and as a result, you have to upload the picture of the test result. So it's got that internal auditing. If we wanted to pay for additional proctoring solution like Binex now, you would have to pay additional money for that.
Sure.
And so we didn't feel that the $9 was worth the investment given the proctoring.
So the card now has an active virus on it, and I think I heard there was some discussion about how we're planning on getting rid of it. Do we have all these kits in place? Do we have the disposal process? The person just tested positive. We just, my colleague, when asked about that, they're supposed to just pick up their desk and leave. Is the kit still on their desk? Is the kit, I mean, is of the 2,000 individuals times the 16 weeks, so we're looking at 24,000 cases, and of which some of them are going to be packets, or some of them are going to be positive. So we thought about what we're going to do with the positive viruses in the building. Is that going to make a whole bunch of happy people in this building?
They're going to be discarded. They will have biohazard containers where they'll take that once they're all done with it and drop it right into it. Just the same way you would do an insulin needle or something like that, where you just drop it in there. Nobody has access to it. They can't put their hands in it, on it. You just simply drop it in that container to dispose of it.
Okay, so we have insulin needles receptacles here, but they are a little small packet.
Right.
These kits, I know how big these kits are. By the time you take the cardboard and the box and you do 24,000, you are looking for a massive amount of positive kits if they're going to follow the same percentage that we're looking at here.
Well, okay.
Yeah. I mean, when we discussed it with building, with Matt Reimer, et cetera, they've used these biohazard processes many times throughout our operations. I don't recall where, but in the jail, for example.
Oh, yeah.
And based on and Matt Reimer, for example, is perfectly aware of what the test kits are. He's used them himself, because that's why we distributed the boxes to council, so everybody understands what the products are involved, how it works, and he's confident that the biohazard process and disposal can be done.
They're going to be all over this building, because you have to have them relatively close proximity to the individual. So every one of these 8 floors is going to have these biohazard, and almost every one of these office sections, breakouts, are going to have these in there, because you have to be prepared to collect them like that, because the person who just walked out the door.
I only reason I don't believe so is because we're not gonna have locations on every floor to provide the employee a safe place to do this. There's gonna be locations in each building. So you might have to leave your floor to go do it.
Oh, okay, so.
Yeah.
So our 20 minutes probably got to a half an hour, more than likely.
Well,
Let's be realistic. If you leave your place of work, it's the 20 minutes, you're going to ride the elevator.
But if we're gonna do that, then I'm gonna go back to 20 minutes because it's just a couple of minutes through, 3 minutes to do the test itself, plus 10 minutes waiting for the
This is only a
result.
10-minute wait, because the Abbott ones are 15 minutes.
Yeah, this is 10. This is 10. Yeah, it's 10.
Well, I guess, as you can tell, I'm not a big fan of mandates. I've made that pretty clear. And now it looks like we're getting ready. Pfizer, as of yesterday, announced that they are getting ready to launch their vaccine for 2-year-olds. Are you thrilled about that? Your grandchild, I don't know if you have grandchildren, but I just cannot imagine putting this is really getting to be a place where we're going to have to draw the line. And I'm going to draw the line at this one here. I'm going to say I'm done back mandating things like that, because the underlying message here is we want people to get stuck in the arm. And I can tell you that I'm sure they're giving you good medical advice. They gave good medical advice to my brother when he went to Vietnam and told him that Agent Orange was going to be fine, and he died of Agent Orange 20 years later. So I'm just becoming a skeptic of mandates. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Schron. Yes, Councilman?
One quick one, and if we don't have time to answer, because I know we're in shortage of time, I just want to lay out a scenario. So, as I stated, HHS, so if a social worker that is,
Speak into the microphone. Thank you.
if a social worker that is mandated to go into a home to lay eyes on the children on their caseloads, and the social worker does not or refuse to do testing, are we liable? So I'm just saying that in generality, so we can think about these scenarios. We have the jail, we have the children in our care. This policy could have, in some instances, could have an adverse effect. So I don't know if you want to respond.
Councilman, I don't have a direct response, but to me, that's a management problem within HHS, is that they find somebody else to go out and make the call. I don't know.
Knowing the overall and how hard in the turnover with social workers, no, that's not an option. So when we make policies like this, we have to look at all our little identifying specific departments and their uniqueness in what we do. So just throwing that out there.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions? Yes, Councilman Gallagher.
Again, I don't blame either one of you. You guys are here delivering the news. Of everything that I've heard here, Councilwoman Conwell, I think, hit on what probably we all want, is we all want to do something. The problem that we've been dealing with the past 2 years is everybody wanted to do something, and all those somethings haven't worked, for the most part, haven't worked. But we want to be in a position where we're defensive. And I think mandates are offensive for more reasons. But as she was saying, if we have the test kits, and I'll only go on my experience, when I got sick, I knew right away I was sick. Right away. I'm like, something's wrong. And then I went and got tested, and it took 5 days. By that time, I was pretty much done with it. If we have the kits, why don't we just provide those to the employees? We're all adults here. Last time I looked, everybody's over 18 that works for the county. And nobody wants to come into work when they're sick, and they have backup if they do contract the disease. Why don't we just provide the kits to the employees so they can take home? We have them. If you're feeling ill, take the test, and then we'll go from there. I mean, and my earlier comments were all roads lead to the shot. You know, we paid people money to take the shot. I think this is more of a grooming thing to take the shot. Look what you won't have to do if you take the shot. Why don't we just allow adults to be adults, give them the test kits, give anybody who wants the test kits, as long as they're employees, don't want to take them home and, selling them or giving them away. In some way, keep track of those. And if you're ill, take the test. That's when you'll know. The screening for, if you have a fever, that was the first indicator that now is out the window. Some people had that. I didn't. I would have got past that. I would have wore a mask and I would have gotten everybody sick. But I didn't even go that far because I knew I was sick. Something was wrong. Had I had a test kit, I would have taken it and I would have known relatively quickly that I had COVID. So I think that would be a defensive maneuver, allowing adults to be adults and responsible, because I don't think there's anybody who wants to come to work sick and get people sick. We all know how easy it is to spread, especially the Omicron. Now we got, what is this, the BA2, 50% of America has that. So we'll be discussing that soon. So I think as an alternative to what the big bite here is you're asking, this big gulp of a maneuver, I think what she brought up is brilliant in that it allows people to determine right away if they're ill. Not can I go to work and here's the proof, here's my work passport. No, I don't feel ill, I'm sick, I'm gonna stay home and we'll go through the process that way. I think that's a better way to handle it. As HR director, if you don't know it, our employees don't like us, they're unhappy with us, they don't like how they're being treated. You know it, I know it, Bob knows it, and he's not been here as long as I have. This place is a petri dish of people that are very angry, and rightfully so. We as their bosses, I don't think treat them very well. And this would be treating them very well, worried about whether or not they're sick, allowing them to be adults, and not forcing them to take a test to prove that they're not sick. Who does that? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And if it was brought up and it wasn't thought of and you went this way, I really have to question the reason and rationale behind it. But what Ms. Conwell brought up, I think, is a perfect solution to where I think we all would like to be.
Thank you, Councilman. Yes, Councilman Miller.
Madam Chair, to my colleagues, I don't think we should despair of all our efforts. There's things that we've done that without question have done some good. If you look at the infection rates we achieved with our homeless population through a variety of efforts, it was like the best in the country. I mean, we really saved lives, and if we look at our efforts in the jail, as of the last I've heard that we've had no fatalities among inmates, and we had a couple among corrections officers that seemed to be COVID related, at least to some degree. But compared to what we've seen in other jails around the country, it's a phenomenal accomplishment. So I think we should have a balanced view that there are things that can be done. There's things that we've done that have worked well and made a difference. Not everything that we've done has totally worked to the best, but we should also feel good that we have been able to accomplish some things.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Schron.
Well, I think what the good news about what you've, I don't envy you having stood up there for an hour plus, but what you have seen, I think, is an example of what we all have referred to as watching sausage being made, and it's not a pretty process. And so this is not a pretty process sometimes when it takes place. But I think you also watched an element of brilliance because my colleague just came up with what I believe to be a brilliant solution, in that those without the vaccine, those with the vaccine can be treated exactly the same by the county. It's a voluntary program. Here's the kits. We want you to take this kit. Please take it home with you. If you feel, I can tell you right at our company, in our HR, every single week when we put this out, we say, if you don't feel good, please don't come in this office. We don't want you. You don't want to be here. You don't want to give your fellow colleagues anything. So here's a kit. Please take it home with you. Use it if you wish. We'll teach you how to use the kit, whether you are vaccinated, because we all know that, heck, I'm a vaccinated person and I picked it up. And guess what? The first thing I did is I took two kits. I took one, and then I went in and get a double check because I want everybody to know as CEO of my organization. And so I double checked. So I think you watch sausage being made. If this gets out of this committee, I'm not going to support it in a mandate, but I would support using county money for those 8,000 kits. And if it means we're going to buy another 8,000 because we have such use of it, but I think it's going to drop off as time goes on. We might find we can get all the way through. Heck, we might find we get all the way through to July 1st and never even used all 8,000 kits. I'd be one of the, I would take the over-under on that too, because I think that it would be a perfect solution. It avoids legal. They can take it home on their own. We don't have to worry about paying them on time. We don't have to worry about the $400,000, $500,000 worth of additional cost. We don't have to worry about the $800,000 worth of labor cost. We don't have to worry about offending any of our labor unions or anything of that nature, because I can almost guarantee if you make it voluntary, a piece of their union staff is going to say, I want that kit because I don't want to infect my wife, my child, my grandkids. And I think we can come out, we do this right. We follow my Councilman Conwell's suggestion. I think you knock a home run out of this thing by flipping the whole messaging from mandate to volunteer, and we provide you with the product. So congratulations to you for a suggestion. I don't have a vote on this committee, but I just applaud you for having come to that point. And this could be voted down here by this committee, and you could still do exactly the same voluntary program.
As I said earlier, it could relieve the fears. It is an excellent suggestion of those that just have the sniffles. They just, for whatever reason, they have a sore throat, and they think, oh my God, I have this terrible disease, and I have nothing to test myself. It would be good, because what could happen is they do just have a cold. They have a little cold, and they could come to work, and now you're not minus an employee that you perhaps might have had stay home. So I think that is a great message. I can't speak for my other colleagues, but I do believe that that would be something that we could probably all get around to give those employees the protection, but also treat them, as Councilman Gallagher suggested, as adults. And they know when they're coming down with a cold or a flu or even this Omicron. They know it. And we need to treat them with the dignity to make those decisions and not come to work when they're sick, or come to work when they thought they were and they weren't. It just gives that flexibility. So at this point, if we don't have any other comments, we have been going on for over 2 hours. I too am not going to support this ordinance as written. So I would suggest, it's up to my colleagues, how they want to handle this, but I would suggest that I will take a motion to not move this item to full body of the council for second reading. And do I have a second on that?
Second.
All in favor? Is there a
Madam
discussion?
Chair.
Discussion, of course.
I think that if we're, I'm not sure what would how I would interpret voting this motion to not refer it out of committee. I mean, does that kill the legislation? I'm suggesting that if we're not ready to move on it, you just ask your colleagues if without objection it could be held in committee, and then that would allow some time for some additional ideas to be developed, and it could be brought back. And so I would prefer that to a formal vote, not to refer, which is kind of like saying we're disapproving it.
Well, I think that, and we'll ask our law director, but I think that what we're suggesting here is that we need to have this legislation completely rewritten. The way that it is written now is not, at least it seems, we'll take a vote and find out, that it is not acceptable. And to come back and rewrite and call it a different number and rewrite it to continue the discussion, which I hope that we will get that opportunity to do that and not just have an executive order, but give us an opportunity to see a new piece of legislation that takes in what it is that we have discussed here. And as a side note, I hope that you broaden your group, that you bring in some counter views, that you maybe take a look at what other materials, as Councilman Tron has brought before you, to consider those things and not just kind of have a groupthink and decide to move forward. So, and please, this thing is changing as we speak. Make sure the information you get is current. But Law Director, I would ask that if they came back with new legislation, not revising this one, but new legislation that is hopefully considering what was mentioned here on council, if that would be, if that can be done.
Certainly, Chairwoman, I think along the lines of what Councilman Miller just suggested, basically you're just going to let this piece die in committee, and then
This piece, and then come back
this
with a new
item,
piece.
and then a new item gets prepared
Madam
for
Clerk.
introduction, and we can start back to the process.
Yes.
Madam Chairwoman?
Madam Chair.
But you don't, that doesn't require a vote, this just sits here. In committee. You haven't voted it
Well, I
out
don't
of
want to
committee.
give the impression that there is room for support here on this committee, because unless we take a vote,
I just have a question for procedural.
all right, go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Just, my understanding is a piece of legislation has been introduced. If it stays in the committee, it's just held, it's in abeyance until the end of the year. You can tidy up everything, and then you vote in totality from the council saying all these pieces. But if this particular piece of legislation gets disapproved here, it goes to the full council as not recommended. And then the entire body would vote on it to say, no, that's the normal legislative procedure from my perspective.
That's a good point. Is
So
that correct?
if we're just going to hold it, it just sits here. But this could come out through the chair of the committee, not recommended for passage by a
That-
vote of this.
Yeah, that's an option as well. You could ask for a vote on whether to move it on and
Because we
just,
can't kill, it was been introduced as a piece of legislation. So I'd like to, we got a caucus going.
stays here.
What's happening
Yeah.
here?
Okay, yeah.
What did I do?
Well, if there is a motion to move this out of committee that does not pass, then it stays here in committee, and then it dies. It basically dies, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well,
Madam Chair.
from what I'm hearing from my colleagues, I think it's best to keep it in committee, that we will not vote on this today. But I want to make sure we send that clear message. Holding it doesn't mean we're open to tweaking it, because this is far removed from what I think this council will accept. And that, as I said earlier, I hope you expand the people that are in your circles to perhaps think of talking perhaps to those other 2,000 employees, that maybe getting more updated research, and especially considering it voluntary so that people can make decisions if they're coming into work. I'm not feeling that good this morning. I wish I had a test, that they would already have one and could come in, and nobody wants to come to work sick. So I think that for all those reasons, I think the decision then will be made. Is there any counter to that,
Madam Chair.
that we will keep
There
this
is a
in
motion
committee?
pending.
We have a motion pending, so
Want to withdraw it, or do you want to?
I do withdraw it.
No,
Thank you.
Personally, I do think it would be cleaner.
I
if
withdraw
you-
my second.
Withdraw your second.
If you
Madam-
make a motion to move this out and actually have it voted down, I think that sends the message you're trying to send on this particular item.
Well, if we vote it down, then as Councilman Sweeney suggested, then it has to go to full council.
No, it
No, it
stays
does
here.
not.
It'll stay here. It dies here, yeah.
Ma- Madam Chair,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes. Councilman Miller, are you in agreement with that? You are Parliament.
I think that that there's a variety of views and a variety of possibilities as to how this could play out, and I think that you're on the best right approach, which is simply to hold it in committee and see what happens. You know, to state my own particular view, which is different from somewhat of what I've heard. I think this legislation could be amended. I mean, if I were doing it, I hear what's been said about the mandates, and I would simply amend this legislation saying that we're going to do weekly testing, except that there would be an opt-out procedure, and that any employee, for whatever reason, they wouldn't have to apply for a religious exemption or anything like that. For whatever reason, they could simply send a memo to their immediate supervisor saying they choose not to participate in weekly testing, and everybody else, we would do the weekly testing program. That's kind of, if I were doing it, what I'd be thinking along. So, but I think
I hear what you're saying, Councilman, but I think that even that could be intrusive. I mean, it's a suggestion kind of going through this 2-hour process where they have probably engaged in this for, as they said, for months, even before Omicron, that I think that I really think that this is intrusive enough that it should be given its merit. It should be given its time. It should be, our comments should be considered. And whether it is, you know, if I want to, okay, if I don't, okay, it's still done under the direction of the county, or should it be just given to employees to take home, or should we not do anything at all because this Omicron, it looks like it's diminishing. Lots of things to consider there, and I just don't think we're ready for prime time on this at all. And I think it would take more than a tweak of just saying voluntary or not. There's a lot involved in this, and more than just voluntary. Even the dollars we haven't really talked about, and the amount of kits that we might be needing or not needing. Too much in question. Yes, Councilman.
I'm just wondering what our budget analyst has to say.
Would you please step up?
Good afternoon now, Trevor Mackler, County Council staff. I was just going to come up and clarify any questions. I think Councilman Schron might have had a clarification question, so I was here regarding the rules, if there's any.
That's it.
So as Councilman Miller pointed out, you could hold it if you wanted to. You could take a vote to send it out of committee. And if it does not get 3 votes, then it in essence dies in committee. So that is it does not have to go to the full council to vote it down or up. Does that help,
Through
Councilman?
the chair, it's just unfamiliar with me, so the entire body doesn't get a chance to look at this at all.
Correct.
It just dies here. It was introduced by the executive for consideration by the entire council. It comes to the council's committee, and the committee votes it down. So the other
6.
6 other members don't get a chance to.
The only way that it could then go to the full council for consideration if there's a motion to discharge from committee, which we have done before, just more for scheduling purposes and other things, not because of this particular scenario.
And I look forward to taking the time to understand it fully, because it's not my understanding that a piece of legislation dies from committee that was introduced.
If it doesn't get 3 votes, it's dead in committee.
Yeah, okay.
Madam Chair.
We'll talk about it more, but
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I would also point out that even for those who who take the position that this needs a lot more than tweaking. It needs a radical, major overhaul. We have, on numerous occasions, done substitutes of that variety, where a piece of legislation is substituted with something that is just way different from the original version, and I think that would be an easier path than requiring that a whole new piece of legislation be prepared and go through the introduction process again. So I'm suggesting just hold it in committee and leave our options open.
Let's move the vote.
Well, as chairs of this committee, I think we've heard enough dissenting comments and enough issues of differences that even though it might be more, as you concede, of tweaking, I do think a message needs to be sent, and that we could go back on the agenda next Tuesday, if the executive prefers to do that, understanding the differences that he's heard here today. I think I will move forward and and make a motion to not move this item to the full body of council for a second reading. And we welcome you back if you want to come back with a brand-new piece of legislation, considering the comments that we've made here, understanding the seriousness of this. And this is really a very serious issue that we're talking about. It is not something that can just be taken and then rewritten. I think it needs to be really talked about, and as I said, bring some new voices into your group, and please come back to us if you desire and take some of the suggestions that we have made. So I have made the motion not
Madam
to
Chair,
send this to full council.
motion should be
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
move it forward, and then yes or no.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
the
but
correct way?
that's more appropriate. And if you
All right.
say no, then it dies here.
Got it. So I will make the motion to move this item to full body of council for second reading. We will take a voice vote.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Please take a voice vote.
Well, you made the
Roll call
initial.
vote.
Are you gonna second it?
Yes.
Mike? Okay.
Calling the roll on ordinance number 2022-0002. Ms. Baker?
No.
Mr. Gallagher? Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney? Ms. Conwell?
No.
Motion does not carry.
Thank you both for your comments. We do appreciate it, and we look forward perhaps of hearing more in a new piece of legislation.